Today, we are going to learn how to do a install using the Teradata MCP server. I'm going to do it from scratch. I'm going to be using the HTTP protocol from the MCP server. This is the protocol that I think is probably most useful because it allows you to have clients from anywhere connect to a server that you can actually locate anywhere. So it's probably got the most flexibility in how to do these sorts of installs. So where I typically start is I start with the Teradata MCP GitHub, and you scroll down and you will see that there is a README file here. It talks about what the tools are that are available. It gives you a quick start for Claude Desktop. This is using the standard I/O protocol. This is not going to be what we're going to use today. We're going to come down into the install instructions. And the first thing that you really need to realize is there's kind of three big pieces to it. One, making sure that you have a Teradata environment running. Two, make sure that you get the MCP server running. And three, making sure that you can then connect a client to that particular environment. So insofar as having a Teradata environment running, if you don't already have a Teradata environment running, it is possible to go to the ClearScape experience. And when you go to that, you're going to be asked to give some information and you will be given an environment. Once the environment is up and running, it will look like this. So I can see that my environment is running. I can see what the host is. I know what the username is. I made the password when I created this environment. So I have a Teradata environment running. So the second step would be now to come into building the Teradata MCP server documentation. And when you come into the install documentation, it gives you a number of different choices. And there's these quick start capabilities here. If one of these fits your particular need, then excellent. I encourage you to follow along with one of those. Where I'm going to go to is I'm going to just come into the server guide and just make sure you are aware that there is like a getting started guide, an installation guide, a configuration guide, an architecting guide, a customizing guide, and a security guide. So there is all of the information that you may or may not need to have when you start thinking about how it is that you are going to tailor your particular installation for your particular needs. And I would encourage you to come and have a look at all of these pieces of documentation. And where I am going to go is we'll just start with the getting started and have a quick look here. And you will see that there is different ways that we can do the installation. There's a CLI installation, a Docker installation, a pip installation, and so on. So depending on who you are is really going to then depend on what you do as far as installations. The subsequent piece would then be how would you configure the server. There's a piece around how you would secure the server, if you need to customize the server, and then it comes into how you connect clients to it. So where we're going to start with is the installation guide. And I come into the installation guide, you are going to see, again, different installation approaches for different people. We're going to do this CLI installation because it is by far the simplest. It gives you a couple of different options when you look at the CLI installation recommended approach. First and foremost, if you are using UV, and UV is a package manager in the same way that pip is a package manager or pipx is a package manager. So they're all just different kinds of package managers. And the information is kind of shown how to get these environments up and running. So the assumption is that you have UV installed, and if you do not have UV installed, then there are some instructions around how to get to UV. And if I just come back for a second, I come back again and I look in the quick guides, because the quick guides do sometimes have the UV installation. So if you needed to get UV, there is a whole website that talks to UV. If you're on a Mac or if you're on a Windows, you would follow these instructions and make sure that you have that UV package installed on your particular environment. So I am going to come back to back out of here. I'm going to come back down into my installation guide, because that's where I was. And we are going to use this option A using UV. And this is really, really simple insofar as UV is already installed on my environment. So I used this brew install UV because I'm on a Mac. But the installation of the Teradata MCP server is as simple as UV tool install Teradata MCP server. And the server comes with a base set of modules. A module is just a grouping of tools. So we come with a base set of modules. But if you wanted the complete set of modules, then you would actually do the installation with the optional modules, FS and TDVS. And we will continue to add optional modules in here over time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start with the simplest base set of models, and I need to come into my environment. I am going to add that UV tool install Teradata MCP server. That is going to start running. And in my particular case, it ran really quickly because I had a lot of these packages already cached in my environment. If you're running it for the first time, it will need to download all of these particular environments. So it may take a little bit longer on the first time that you perform this. The second thing that should be noticed is when you take this UV tool install approach, it is going to install the package in your local directory in .local/bin. And it's the same regardless of whether you are on a Mac or on a PC. It'll end up being in whatever your personal root directory is, and then in a folder called .local/bin. And we will, if we have a look in .local/bin, you will see that here's my package that has been installed. The second piece that you probably need to be aware of is making sure that you export the path. So, and how you set up paths varies a little bit from environment to environment and from shell to shell, but really at its simplest, you are just going to take this export, drop it in there, and on a Mac, I'm just going to export into my path environment that local bin path. So send that. So I've now set up my environmental variable. So we are now at a point that we can start looking, and start by just doing a quick Teradata MCP server help, because that will give us a view. I'm just going to clear so it's a little easier to see, put the help in there, and the help environment is going to kick off the server and give us the instructions for how you would actually call the server. Similarly, you could do a version and understand what version you're actually running. So in my particular case, I am running the most recent version that is hosted on the PyPy repository. So when you do that UV install, what you are doing is you are actually taking this package from the pypy.org repository, and This is not necessarily the most recent version of the environment. If you want the most recent version of the environment, you would be doing a Git clone. But what we do is every so often we will package up all of the changes that are happening on the GitHub, and we will turn that into a package and make that available on the PyPy server. So this is certainly a good one to be using, nice stable release, and has most of what you would want. But I do want to make you aware that it is not necessarily the absolute cutting edge of where we are on the repository in its completeness. So now that we have set up our environment, the next piece that we would be doing is we would need to start our environment, but we come down, and when we are running our environment, and there are some pieces that you can do here around customization and whatnot. I'm not going to do any of those. I'm just going to take the complete default. But when you come down to running the environment, you need to make sure that you have a database URI that has been defined. So we're going to define our database URI. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to export my database URI. And in my database URI, I need to now give it a name. So the Teradata :/ is just telling you that it's a Teradata database. And then the structure, as you will see, is username, password, @host : port number, and the port number for Teradata is 1025 / and whatever the default schema is. So in my particular environment, my username is demo user. And how did I know that? Because in my ClearScape environment, here's my username. I then go : and password. So in my particular environment, I have been very inventful and called my password password. And then and then I need the host address. And here is my host address. So I can copy my host address. So really, I'm just copying this piece here, or whatever your particular host address is. I'm going to drop that in there. : 1025, which is the port number, then /, and it is going to be the default database. Now, if you don't know what the default database is, then it's typically on the Teradata system, it is going to be the same as the username. So in my particular case, it is going to be demo _user. And once I have exported that database URI, and you'll notice that I had the entire database URI in quotes so that it really reads it as a single string, you are now ready to actually run your server. And when it comes to running your server, there is a number of different configurations that you could be running with. And we saw that when we did the Teradata MCP Server help. Now, in general, the order of precedence for where we pick up the environment variables goes if it is an argument in how I called the server. So when I go Teradata MCP Server, if I have database version, if I had database URI, and then I had a different URI here, then, and I'll just put some text in there, it would use this particular one versus this particular one. And we don't want to do that. We want it to use this one. But I just want you to be aware that if you use the argument will get used as the first priority. The second priority would be anything that you have exported into an environment variable. The third priority would be a .env file. So I will let you kind of do your own research to understand what a .env file. And the fourth priority would be whatever we have as the defaults. So in our particular case, we do not want our Teradata MCP Server database URI, but there are a couple of parameters that I do think are probably worth changing. And when I think about the ones that are worth changing, they tend to be, and I'm just seeing if I can see them in amongst our documentation, is scrolling down. So you can see here is there'd be a -- profile all. That would be a classic one that I would have. And I actually want the MCP server, and I'm just going to give myself a new window. I'm just going to drop that over here. UV. So I want to have one called MCP_transport. So this is the transport server, the transport, and I want it to be streamable -HTTP. And the reason I want it to be streamable HTTP is because this is what I want the transport mode to be. The default mode, I believe, is standard IO. This may change in time because streamable HTTP is becoming the de facto standard for the transports for MCP. I could also have a MCP_host, and I'm going to set that to my local machine. I am going to have MCP_port, and I'm going to set that to 8001. Now, it is worth understanding that the default for MCP host is 127.0.0.1, and the default for MCP port is 8001. So you didn't really need to make these changes, but I think it's kind of helpful for some people to be thinking about these. The last one that I tend to have is the auth mode, so auth_mode. And in my particular case, I'm going to have it as none. But if you wanted to use the basic auth mode, this is where you would set this up. Now, we already have the database URI in there. And then the last one that I always have is the profile. And when we talk about configurations, we can talk about what the profile really means, but -- profile, and I'm just going to say I want access to all of the tools. A profile is a way of giving you control over which tools become available in the server. That all being done, I'm going to run my particular server, and I am going to expect my particular server to run. Because I am just running the base modules, I do get a couple of warnings, but all of these warnings are things that you can kind of ignore for the moment. You can see that the fast MCP2 kind of banner is there, and you can see that what the server name is, you can see what the transport mode is, you can see what the server URL is, etc., etc. So if you got to this point, you should be looking really good. And that is actually all there is to getting a server up and running using HTTP. So the second piece that we're going to now talk about is then how do you then connect a client tool to this particular fast MCP server. And I'm just going to use Claude Desktop just because that is a client tool that I have access to. And you'll notice that I just, turned Claude Desktop off completely, because what I want to do is when I have Claude Desktop come up, I want it to pick up the configuration file. And here's my Claude Desktop. And you'll notice that because I already have a configuration file set up in here, and we'll show you how to look at that configuration file, that I got all of these messages here. And all of these messages that just appeared is Claude Desktop doing a configuration, connecting to this particular server. So what does it look like in Claude Desktop? Well, when you get into Claude Desktop, I will make this a little bit bigger. And we might even just make that a bit so we can see, is within Claude Desktop, you have the ability through the settings to then come to the developer. And within the developer, you can edit a config. So if I edit a config, it is going to edit this Claude_desktop_config.json file. And if I open that particular file up with my editor of choice, I'm just going to make that a bit bigger, is going to have this particular configuration file in it. So let's talk about what this configuration file is doing. It is a JSON structure. It is telling Claude Desktop that this is going to be my list or dictionary of servers, of MCP servers. Here's the first server, and I only have one server in it. So this is a server definition. And in the server definition, there is this Teradata MCP streamable is the name of my server. And then there is a command that it will run. The Claude Desktop will run this npx command. And then through the npx, it uses this MCP remote application to connect to my endpoint, or my MCP endpoint, which was that 127.0.0.1/MCP/, and I know that it is a HTTP server because it is a /MCP/ thing, and I'm going to allow HTTP. So pretty simple configuration that is being done here. I'm not doing anything fancy whatsoever, but once you have saved this, you can close the file, and what you will see is if you now come to Claude and you quit Claude proper, or you exit Claude and then you start Claude again, Claude will now actually use that configuration file to connect to your MCP server. And how do you know that you have connected to it? Because within Claude, you can come down to the search and tools. And within the search and tools, you should see this Teradata MCP server. Looks like I need to update my system. And if I click inside, you should see all the tools. Now, very, very occasionally, I find that I have to wait a minute or two for Claude to connect to the server. If you find that you do have some issues with it, I do know that on a Mac, you can come in and you can reload MCP configurations and such. But what I should now be able to do is, what databases do I have? I'm now expecting that as it asks this question, it is now going to go and have a look at my tools that are available. It's picking a tool that it thinks is going to be able to give me the answer, and away you go. So there you go. You have installed your MCP server. You have run your MCP server as a streamable HTTP server. You have connected your Claude Desktop to your MCP server. Now, if you're not going to be using Claude Desktop, we also have instructions for quite a number of different client tools. I'm just going to come back to my client tools. And if you come to the client guide, you can start with the client overview. You can see that we have, Claude instructions for Claude Desktop, for Microsoft Copilot, for, I think we're still working on Google Agent Pace, Open Web UI. There's a trusted Teradata data agent, so somebody has built a really robust client, Perplexity desktop, and so on. So there's lots of different clients out there. We don't necessarily have the instructions for every single client that's out there, but if you are going to work on your client, you will find that in general, the kind of pieces of information that you need to do a connection is probably going to be covered here. So with that, I'm going to take a pause and thank you very much.